This tutorial is dedicated a bit more to Cinema4D and understanding it just a little bit in greater depth, so that if you are interested in it, you can possibly use it within After Effects, specifically 2D, 3D integration and making 3D objects look like they are 2D. While this is a 2D class, I think that it's important to be able to use 3D objects in a 2D way and integrate them with your work. So, like I mentioned before, After Effects comes with Cinema4D Lite. It's a little bit tricky to get to if you don't know where it is, because you can't just go to your applications and find it. However, I do believe Maxon now has a student version for the full version is a student version as well, so you can find that on Maxon's website. But we can go up to File, New, Cinema4D File, and I'm just going to call this 2D project, and it will be in our I made another file. I made a Cinema4D file in our animation project folder. So it opens up, and it's quite similar to Maya, but there are some different things, including the controllers and just some general workflow. I think that I like Cinema4D's workflow a bit better, and you'll find that Cinema4D is, there we go. You'll find Cinema4D is used often for motion graphics. It has a node-based system, and so does Maya, but it works a bit differently. So let's look at how we could introduce any shape. So this button right here, if we click and hold, we have all sorts of shapes that we can introduce into our plane. I'm gonna just do a cube. I click and the cube shows up. First, let's go over some of the controls. So E is going to be moving the cube. R is going to be rotate, which makes sense. And then T is going to be scaling the cube. In order to change more things about the cube, such as faces, vertices, and edges, we have to make the cube editable. And in order to do that, we can go over to here to make editable. And now I can select my vertices. I could select this one, and I can move that down if I want to. Could move this one up. And just generally, this is how I can start to manipulate my shapes and how to model and things like that. So I rotated the camera there by, I believe that was Option, and then I have my my mouse button, my left mouse button, I hold down and I can rotate. So Option, mouse button, regular mouse button, left side, and that will allow me to rotate. With my wheel, I can scale in and out, and then Option, click on the wheel and hold down, I can pan. So similar methods to Maya. I'm not 100% sure if they're exactly the same. I do know that the E, R, and T, those are different. So it's funny, like, trying to move in between Maya and Cinema4D, just because, like, I was working in Maya for so long, and now I'm trying to do more Cinema4D, and it takes a moment to, like, switch to these methods instead. So then I can go back to if I wanted to, I could do things up here. I can make subdivisions. So this is how I would sort of smooth my object. I could you see when I click that, I can drag and click my cube and put it into this sort of folder. And my arrow changes so that it's down. That's what I want to do. And now we see it's smoothed out. And that's what we do when we also see that in Maya, we would need some extra edges on there to make it a bit more, retain the shape a bit more and not so spherical. I'm gonna get rid of the subdivisions. So definitely it takes a bit of learning how to model and all of that, just like in Maya, in order to actually be able to create some interesting work. But we can download some models. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to download a model and import it into here, and that's how I'm going to show you how to make some work. You can find 3D models to download off of a website called TurboSquid. I would recommend checking this out. And some of them are you have to pay for, and then of course some of them are free, which is great. This is a great way to just practice with objects. Generally, I would say if you are if you're making work and you're putting it onto the world, I would generally say, like, try and do your own modeling or try and work with someone. But of course, there's these copyright-free images we can always get, and they're good for practice, and we can include them in our work sometimes. Definitely try and get better at modeling, so you don't always have to rely on downloading work. When you are looking for an object, make sure that you find an OBJ. That will be one of the easier files to work with when we bring it into Cinema4D. So I downloaded some files already, and I'm going to open one up and start to work with that. So I'll go into Cinema4D, File, Open Project, and I'm going to work with this one here. It's an ice cream cone. And we want to consider how we import the object. Right here we look at splitting, and I've had varying success with each one of these. But basically we want to be able to access different parts of the object. We don't want it to just import as one whole thing. We want to be able to say access the cone and then access the ice cream. So with this one, I think by material is best, but some other objects that I've imported, split polygon groups, also works. So let's do by material, and I'll say okay. And here we go, we have our cone. So first thing I want to think about is actually, so remember the smoother, I don't want it to be quite so sharp right here. It doesn't really look like ice cream to me, so I'm going to add the subdivision surfaces. I'll just click, and then I'll drag my cone into subdivision surfaces, make sure the arrow is pointing down, and there we go. That looks a bit smoother right there. We see that it smoothed out the sides some. Just generally looks better. Let's drag it back out, and you can see we got some angles, and then we drag it in, and it's smoothed out. So I want to start preparing this to make it something we could use in After Effects. I'm going to first say File, Save, and I'm going to save this as ice cream cone. And now I want to change the colors and all that good stuff. if we go back to After Effects, we can go to File, Import, File, and I'm going to say Import Ice Cream Cone Cinema4D. This one is over here because remember we went up into After Effects File, New Cinema4D File, and that's how we got Cinema4D running. But we're gonna add a new one. We're just gonna import it. Now we have it here, and I'm gonna delete the old one there. I'm gonna make a new composition. 24 frames per second, that's fine. Let's make sure we keep our comps labeled. And if we drag ice cream cone into our comp, we can see that it's been imported, and I want to have just a without the grid. So I'm going to come over here to Cineware, and this is the sort of go-between software that works between After Effects and Cinema4D. This is what allows it to work together. I'm going to change viewport draft to current, and then you can see I have this here, and we can start to introduce new things already if we want to. We can introduce a solid. Let's have a nice light blue. Drop it down underneath, and we already have a background for our ice cream cone. All right. I'm also going to just shorten this comp while we're here. And remember, we'll pull your work area to where your playhead is, right click, trim comp to work area. Let's go back to Cinema4D. So I want to change these colors. This down here is our materials editor, much like in Maya. I'm going to select this one right here, and we'll see this area pop up over here. Or you can double click and it will bring up your material editor. I like to work over here. So I want it to look flat because I want it to integrate into our Cinema4D file. I want it to look flat because I want it to integrate into our After Effects file. In our Basic tab, we can see that we have all these options. I'm actually going to turn off color and reflectance. I'm going to turn on luminance. When I turn these things on and off, you can see the tabs up here change. So I'll turn off luminance, it disappears. Turn on luminance, that's what I want. And I'll go into luminance. And let's do like a nice strawberry color. So first I'll raise up the value, so we start to get color in the saturation area. I'm going to pump this up, and I want it to be a bit more pink than that. That looks nice. Now let's go to our next material. I'm going to change this to luminance, and maybe a cream color for sort of like vanilla, a bit more white. And then the cone, so same thing, basic, luminance, and pump this up. Let's take this to a darker brown. That looks good. So I'll hit File, Save Project, and now when I go over to After Effects, it's been updated. So making things rotate in 2D space is one of the most challenging movements. And I don't mean rotate in concerning like we come into here and we do rotation. I mean rotating so that it includes parallax and it includes z-space. And that's what 3D objects really allow us to do, is have include the z-axis, and we include some parallax, and definitely gives it a fuller shape. So if we want to have this ice cream cone rotate, we can't have it rotate here in After Effects. We can have it maybe like rotate around this point down here, or we could have it rotate around the point up there. But I mean fully rotate like 360 degrees. We can't do that in After Effects. We do have to go back into Cinema4D to do that. And if I wanted to try and move my ice cream cone, we're also going to see it comes up with a message whenever I try and move. So it says max on Cinema4D layer must match composition and use default transformation values. So we can't move it. So how we can start to move it is we can make a pre-comp. So I'm going to say right click, pre-compose, ice cream cone, pre-comp. So this is moving it into another file or another folder, and Okay, that's not exactly what I thought was going to happen. It should have allowed us to move, once we had pre-composed it, all this Cinemaware should have been, I was expecting it to stay in this pre-comp folder. So let's go back, Command Z a couple times, just once, and now I'm just gonna make a new comp. And now I'm gonna drag my ice cream cone into here. And you can see now if we go over to the effect controls, Cinemaware is not included, but if we dive into it, there it is. So I'm not sure why that you can't pre-compose it. Instead, you have to go about nesting it, which is this idea of making a new composition and then pulling it into that composition. Very similar to pre-comping, just kind of like different steps. So we make a new comp and we pull our composition into here, and now you can see what we can do. If we wanted to rotate it, now we're good. So I'm going to, I don't know, maybe like take my anchor point, and I'll sorry, Y for anchor point, not sure what I'm doing. I'm gonna take my anchor point and move it down to the bottom of my cone, and I'm also going to scale it down a bit, move it up. Let's keep scaling, scale. That's good. And I want to duplicate. And I'm going to rotate. How could we figure out rotation values? So 360 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 72, so I can say 72 right here, and then I could also say 72 times 2, 72 times 3, and 72 times 4. We have a nice little star-shaped ice cream cone. I'm going to add a new shape layer. I'm going to put it underneath. I'm going to double-click my ellipse tool, make this a circle, scale it down maybe a little. And it looks like our ice cream cones aren't quite exactly centered. That's better. Okay, turn on snapping. That looks like it's good. And I'm going to change the color. I like the blue combination. Okay, so now let's go back to Cinema4D. And we want this ice cream cone to rotate. So how can we do that? We're going to select the object as a whole. You can see here, if I open up my object, I have my 3 different parts, my 3 different materials. If I wanted to change one of the materials, I could just drag this up and I could put that there and then just have a vanilla ice cream cone. To rotate our object, I'm going to select my object. Then I'm going to come down here to basically our attribute editor, I guess, for the object. We have basic, coordinate, and object. I'm going to select the coordinates and there we go. Now we can see it all. I'm going to start here at 0 and I'm going to come down to my timeline. Let's double check my timeline. So if I go up to Edit, Project Settings, I want to make sure my frames per second is going to match what my After Effects file is. So I'm changing this to 24. And then if I go down here to my timeline, I can also change it here. And if I have project selected, that's going to match what I have here in my project settings. So timeline's good now, and I want it to rotate in 2 seconds, so that would be 48 frames. I will have my first keyframe start here. I need to go back to my object, select that, and I'll make a keyframe. You can see when we make a keyframe, this marker is added over here. And I'll go to 48. Actually, I'll go to 47, yeah, because, well, we'll double check this. Sometimes I get confused on this, but if the 48th frame is the beginning, then we want to go like if the 48th frame is the start of the repetition, then we would want to go to the 47th. But if we do 360 on 48, sorry, this isn't really making sense. But so 360 on 48, and it starts over. I'm gonna change my frame selection here to 48. And now if I hit play, oh, nothing happens because I forgot to hit my keyframe. So select my object again, go back here, it didn't change, so 360. Now I want to make another keyframe, I'll add that there. That's not the movement I wanted. I wanted it to turn around, so which one does that? There we go. So I'll add my 360 here. Make a keyframe. Now let's play. Great, it's spinning, it's rotating, that's what we want. But it is, it's having this start and stop motion, which we do not want. So I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to go up to my object. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to come down to show F curves. this is the graph editor in Cinema4D, and just like graph editor in After Effects. I'm going to select these 2 points here. I'm going to come up here and make them linear. So this will make it a straight line. And now when we play, there we go. And so here, yeah, you can see that my I have the tiniest of pauses right there, and that's basically because that the 48th frame. So the 48th frame and the 0 frame are duplicates because it's reached 360 here, and the 0 is the same, basically the same value. So we'll change this to 47. And now let's look. And there we go, nice, smooth, all the way around. I'm gonna say File, Save Project. And now when I go back to After Effects, I have the rotation occurring in my project. It does take quite a bit of rendering power. We can see that this is not real time. We can render out what we have and with the cache, but every time we make a change, it's going to have to redo that. So I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to make this composition right up to my last frame, trim comp to work area. So for the sake of being able to see the example a bit clearer in After Effects, I wanted to also have my cone rotate on another axis, just to kind of be fun. You can tell that I'm moving the camera, and this is going to affect our view in After Effects. So it looks a bit chaotic. Kind of has a big jump there, yeah. There we go. So I'll say File, Save Project. And I'll come back to After Effects. So you can see this is, it changed things. I already came in here and I changed my composition height a bit. I'm going to take this back down, and because if I didn't do that, it was getting cut off, and I want to make sure that the whole animation is included. Now if I go back here, you can see, so this anchor point changed because basically I changed the camera view in here as well, so that affected this. So let's adjust that. Maybe we can just go into anchor point and shift this around. I don't know if that will work. Yeah, that's better. So if I select all of them, move that around. Maybe if I hit some scale, I want to scale it up a bit. Let's see what it looks like. So, I don't know, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but you can see what is happening here with how 3D works. If I wanted to continue to make this loop, I Actually, what I'll do is I'll make another composition. And I'll say ice cream cone, Command K, and I want to make this much longer, let's say around 10 seconds. And then the easiest way to do that is probably just to duplicate a number of times, shift select all of them, keyframe assistant, sequence layers, okay. Now I can, I believe, replace these with my ice cream loop. If I hold down Command, so if I have this selected and then I come up here, hold down ice cream loop, drag, hold down Option as well, so I drag it down, I replace it with that. You can see I can drag that out. I could do that for all of them. So shift select, hold down Option Alt, click, drag, and it replaces them. I probably would have the rotation different, maybe not have them twirl out so much. And maybe have the anchor point actually from the center of the cone in the After Effects file, as well as here in the Cinema4D file. You can see the anchor point is happening right here. What else could we do with this? We could add new shape layers on top, and just to have, like, I don't know, we could have bubbles rising up or something. Maybe pink. Position. Bring that up. Duplicate this a number of times, change the position on it. So in order to change position with something that already has keyframes, we have to be over one of the keyframes, the playhead should be over it, and then we can come over here and we can change it, and both of them will adjust. So I could have, yeah, I could have these bubbles sort of start to rise up, and I could delay them at different times. Probably moving a bit too fast right now, but I can put my 2D layers over top of my Cinema4D file. Because Cinema4D does require some computing power, and if we make any changes and things, we have to re-render, and just generally, even without making changes, sometimes if we have a heavier file than this, perhaps it will take some time to load and to render. So we can deal with this by getting rid of the Cinema4D file if we know that this is for sure how we want our Cinema4D object to move in this space. We can come over to After Effects. Once that has been finalized, we could decide to render this composition as an image sequence. And so that's going to be a lot easier to use and easier on our computer to use than the Cinema4D file. So I can go up to Composition, be in the composition you want to render as an image sequence, Composition, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. And often it takes a moment to pop up. There we go. And I want to change this from H.264 to a JPEG sequence. That will be fine. Export as sequence. I'll hit OK. And if I don't change the location of the save file, so Adobe Media Encoder, whenever you start to render with it, it makes an extra folder wherever your After Effects file is. So in my project directory, I have my After Effects folder, and then I have my After Effects file, and then Adobe Media Encoder creates this extra folder, and it will put your renders into that folder if you do not specify where you want to place it. I'll put it in Photoshop and footage. I guess I'll put it in footage, and I'll make an extra folder and I'll call it ice cream. I don't know. You can decide where you would want to put an image sequence. Maybe we would make a whole extra folder over here and make an image sequence there. So I'll hit save and it will render. Oh, and I just realized, no, I don't think we want to save this as a JPEG. We want to do this as a PNG because we want to keep the transparency. So let's do that again. So JPEG, PNG, that's what we want. Now we could come back to our After Effects file, say Command I. We can go to our footage, ice cream, PNG is what we want. I'm going to import it as a PNG sequence. I'll right click on my PNG sequence and we say interpret footage, main. And I want to say 24 frames a second, straight unmatted. And then this is actually interesting too. We could have it loop as many times as we want, so we could do 10. So now, instead of having to do this whole loop thing here, that extra thing, we could have just this loop here. So I'll go back to my ice cream cone, and so we've decided we don't need Cinema4D anymore. We've decided our specific movement, so I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to bring my PNG sequence down here. I want to open this up so that it's much longer. Let's say 10 seconds. There we go. Way easier on the computer. And I'll come back to my main comp, and we don't need this loop anymore actually. So what I can do is I can come to my ice cream cone and I can replace my ice cream loop, all these, and so I'll select, hold down Option, click, drag, and I replace my ice cream loop with the rendered file. I had made some extra little bubbles that come in. And it doesn't quite render it full, but once we go back and once we have the area that is rendered, we get the real-time render. So that's how you, if you have really complicated movement, maybe more complicated than what we have here, then you could bake your footage into an image sequence and use that instead of the Cinema4D file. I want to show you how to do one more thing in Cinema4D just to show you some possibilities. I'm going to make a little design with some text that I have. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to use the spline and I'm going to make my text move around in sort of a square circular motion. I can add rounding to my spline and I can change the height and the width. What I want to do now is add an extrusion. So I'll click on this. If I drag my rectangle into my extrusion, you see it builds more of a shape. And I'm going to go into my extrude and I want to turn off the caps. So now I have something that looks excuse me, now I have something that looks kind of like a conveyor belt. And I want to add text to this. So I can do that with creating a material. I'll come down here and I'll make a new material. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, turn on my luminance, and I also want to turn on alpha. And I'm going to go in my alpha tab and I'm going to use a texture. So my texture that I've created is this file right here, and I've saved it as a PNG. And I know that I wanted to have it rotated in that way instead of vertical. I know that I wanted to have it rotated in that way because I've done this a couple times now, and I know that in order to put our text onto this object, we want it to be rotated 90 degrees. So we'll go to texture, and I'm going to select my days of the week. I should probably change the name of that, but I'll just say open. And just because so this image is not in your search path, do you want to put it in your project location? So that's something you probably should do. If I was actually using this in a project, I would want to go ahead and like set up, put the file in the right location to begin with. So you can see my text is now on my material, and I can drag my text to the extrusion. We see it's been added over here, and it's a little bit squashed, so I need to do some things to change that. I can go to my extrude object, offset. I can move that out. I can also go back to my material, and that will start to change its location and well, as it's wrapped around. If I wanted to have it multiple times, I could hit 2, and now we see it's wrapped around twice. And of course I can always come back to my rectangle as well if I want to change the actual length of the conveyor belt. We could do that too. I'm going to pull that back down a little bit, and I want to go back. I just want to have it one time. And I will put this back to 0. And let's move that out a little bit. Let's see how. That's good. So I'm going to save. I call this the days of the week. And if I go into After Effects, import days of the week, new composition, 1920, 1080. turn this off. And oops. All right, that's better. Now what I can do is I want to change some colors of my text. On my text, I can tell it to do the top, the back, which we can't see, or both. And so let me first, I'll create a second material. So I'm going to duplicate this. I can do command click drag, duplicates. In this one, I'm going to go to my basic, turn off my luminance, and just have my black. Now I will drag, I'm going to duplicate this as well, and then drag this to that up there. So if I, it doesn't look like I did what I wanted to, but now I can go to both. Let's have this one be back, and the white, let's have that one set to front. I also want to start having this rotate. Now, unfortunately, the black texture is not moving. That's because these are controlled by two different offsets. So what I want to do actually is I'm going to delete the black. I'm going to come here to the white, start at 0. I'm going to have this last for 3 seconds. Let's make sure my project settings 24 frames a second. That's great. I'll make a keyframe here, and then I'll move to my 73rd frame, type in 360, I'm sorry, type in 100, because it's percent, so 100%. Make a keyframe by hitting this, and now we should have movement. Excellent, we do. And I'll change this back to 72 frames now. I want to go up here, and I want to, I'll right click on my extrude, show F curves, change that to linear, and now I'm just going to drag this over, make a second copy, and all of the animation that I had applied is now on this one as well, so I can take this, drag it up there, and apply it to that. And now I can change this to back, and this one is still on front. So now I have this moving, rotating days of the week. I'm going to hit File, Save. And if I come over here into After Effects, we can see, let's add a shape layer. I'm sorry, let's add a solid. Let's do blue, that's fine. And then I can do some tint, and I'll change this to, I don't know, maybe a darker blue. And this could be a whitish blue. Maybe let's do, I don't know, we could do a yellow actually. That looks nice. And then I will try and render, and it will take some computing power. So again, this is where it would be nice to render this out ahead of time. Now that we know this is basically what we want, we could create an image sequence out of this, and then we could just bring that image sequence back into After Effects. You're going to start to hear the computer to make noise, or you're going to start hearing the computer make noise, because it's trying to work real hard and it's trying to render. Let's drag this thing. So again, I want to include this in class because I think it's important that you know how to composite, and you can do some neat stuff with 3D works, 3D animations in After Effects, which can be considered as a compositing software. You can do some cool stuff with it. So I hope this gives you a greater idea, a little bit of some Cinema 4D.